Imagine opening your eyes in total darkness. No air moving, no sounds from the living world. Only the weight of linen pressing against your skin, and the crushing realization that you are sealed inside your own tomb. You try to breathe. You can't. You try to move. The bandages hold you in place. Yet somehow, you are fully aware, not dreaming, not fading, awake. This is the night the Egyptians prepared for their entire lives, because for them, this moment was not the end. It was the beginning of a far more dangerous journey. Most of us grew up thinking the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with death and mummies, rows of wrapped bodies in museums, golden masks, cold sarcophagi, but old legends tell a different story. Did you know those tombs were not built just to store a corpse, but to launch a conscious traveler into a hidden realm beneath the stars? To them, the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, was a vast, living landscape that had to be crossed, step by step, test by test. In that first silent moment inside the tomb, the real fear was not being buried. It was what came next. The Egyptians believed the soul was not a single simple thing. Ka, Ba, Ak, heart, name, shadow. Each part had a role, and each could be lost. Death was not one clean cut. It was a series of thresholds. Pass a gate, live on. Fail a test, forget a name, speak the wrong answer to a guardian, and a second death waited in the dark. According to the stories, the Duat was filled with rivers of fire, serpent-filled caverns, and gates guarded by beings with lion, crocodile, and falcon heads. Every hour of the night, a new region, new questions, new dangers. This is why tomb walls were carved with images of boats, stars, and strange, looping pathways. They were not decorations, they were maps. What kind of knowledge could guide someone through that maze? Hidden inside coffins, painted on papyrus, whispered by priests in temple schools, there were spells that acted like passwords, names of guardians, secret routes around lakes of flame, rituals that promised, if you say these words, no knife can harm you, no demon can swallow your heart. Only the prepared could survive the night and come forth again with the sun. Welcome back to the channel. Here we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. Did you know the text we call the Book of the Dead was never called that in ancient Egypt? Its true title was the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Not a book about disappearing into darkness, but a manual for returning to the light as an awakened, effective spirit. And most importantly, it was meant to be rehearsed while still alive. So when that first breathless awareness dawned inside the tomb, the question was simple and terrifying. Had you studied enough? In this series, we'll walk that manual together and follow the soul through the Duat, hour by hour, to see who truly makes it to the morning. What really happens after death, framing the central mystery. So when that first breathless awareness dawned inside the tomb, the question was simple and terrifying. Had you studied enough? In this series, we'll walk that manual together and follow the soul through the Duat, hour by hour, to see who truly makes it to the morning. But what really happened in those first moments after the last heartbeat? Did you know the Egyptians believed death unfolded as a sequence, not a single instant? They imagined the ka, the life force, peeling away from the still body, the ba, the mobile, bird-like aspect of the soul, stirring awake and lifting into a hidden dimension. Who did you meet first in that darkness? A kindly guide, a jackal-headed guardian, or something far less forgiving? According to the stories, the Duat was not just a vague underworld. It was a mapped territory with gates, caverns, and rivers of fire, each watched by beings who demanded precise names and passwords. What if you hesitated? What if you forgot a single line? How many times could you die in those secret chambers before dawn, erased by a serpent, drowned in primordial waters, or cut apart by a guardian whose name you failed to speak? For thousands of years, the most detailed versions of this map were not public. The earliest pyramid texts were carved deep inside royal chambers, where only pharaohs and a circle of priests could see them. Later, coffin texts and books like the Duat spread that knowledge to high initiates, but even then, much of it stayed hidden on tomb walls, wrapped into sarcophagi, or encrypted in temple halls no ordinary person would ever enter. What kind of knowledge was so powerful that it had to be locked away with the dead? This episode makes a promise. We will follow that hidden journey from the moment of death, through the 12 hours of night, to the weighing of the heart before Ma'at. We will stand beside the scales, where the heart, left inside the mummy as the seat of memory and conscience, is measured against a single feather. We'll see what happens if the heart is heavy, fed by lies and imbalance, and what it means to face Amit and the terror of a second, final death. Most importantly, we'll explore what it meant to become an Ak, an effective, luminous spirit that could move freely with the gods and come forth by day like the rising sun. Old legends tell a different story about these trials. They hint that the mystery schools were not only preparing pharaohs for the afterlife, but training living initiates to walk this inner landscape through rituals, sound, and controlled journeys into darkness. So this is not just a history lesson. It is an initiation into how an ancient civilization turned its temples and tombs into schools of the afterlife. By the end, we'll find out together how to read tomb art, funerary texts, and even the layout of chambers as coded instructions for inner transformation. And as we enter the first hour of the night, the question becomes, are these maps describing a world after death, or a hidden terrain inside the living mind, from tombs to training halls, reframing Egypt's obsession with death? For thousands of years, our picture of ancient Egypt has been framed by a single, haunting image: the land of tombs. We think of the pyramids rising over the Giza plateau, the painted corridors of the Valley of the Kings, and glass cases in museums where rows of mummies lie under fluorescent light. Is this all Egypt wanted us to remember? Its obsession with death? In this familiar story, the Egyptians spent their lives preparing for a distant paradise. They preserved the body so the soul could live forever in a kind of heavenly field, the field of reeds, where the dead farmed, feasted, and reunited with family. Tombs were stocked with food, tools, jewelry, and Shabti servants. The great fear was the weighing of the heart before Ma'at's feather, and the terrible second death in the jaws of Amit if the heart proved heavier than truth. It sounds like a religion built on anxiety about judgment, but what really happened inside those hidden chambers? Were they only warehouses for the dead, or something more like training halls for the living? Did you know some ancient writers hinted that Egypt was filled with mystery schools, where priests and pharaohs studied secret texts long before they ever lay in a sarcophagus? Old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, the temples and tombs were not just memorials, but classrooms. Clement of Alexandria spoke of 42 sacred books, a curriculum said to cover philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and rituals. Imagine walking into a tomb whose walls are covered not with random scenes, but with diagrams of the sky, hymns to hidden gods, and step-by-step instructions for the soul. Suddenly, the chamber looks less like a grave and more like a textbook carved in stone. In that light, the Duat itself begins to change. This was not a simple hell below and heaven above. It was a vast symbolic landscape of gates, caverns, rivers, and islands where the sun god Ra travelled each night in his boat, battling the serpent Apophis to ensure that dawn would return. The dead were believed to follow that same journey, hour by hour, through 12 regions of night. Each gate had a name. Each guardian demanded precise words. Every wrong answer meant danger. Every correct response opened the way. Most importantly, this map of the Duat reads like a training manual. Every tomb becomes a schoolroom, every painted scene a lesson. The Book of the Dead, or Book of Coming Forth by Day, functions less as a gloomy prophecy and more as a set of travel instructions. How to keep the car nourished, how to guide the bar through hidden passages, how to emerge as an Ak, a luminous, effective spirit. So what if these tombs doubled as rehearsal spaces, where initiates practice death while still alive, memorizing passwords in the dark? And if that is true, what kind of knowledge were they really guarding behind those sealed doors? In the next part of our journey, we step inside one of these chambers and follow the soul to its first trial at the gates of night. Who got the map? Pharaohs, priests, and the elite of the Duat. When we step into those dark chambers, there is a disturbing question waiting for us. Who was actually given the full map of the Duat? Did you know that, for thousands of years, the most detailed instructions for the afterlife were not meant for everyone, but were carved for a single person? In the Old Kingdom, the earliest pyramid texts appear only on the walls of royal pyramids. No village tombs, no merchant graves, just the pharaoh. Imagine standing in that narrow passage, a torch flickering over columns of tiny green hieroglyphs, and realizing every spell, every secret name is addressed to one soul, the king. According to the stories, he alone was expected to rise as a star, to sail with Ra, to walk the hidden tunnels of the Duat, with a complete travel manual at his side. But what really happened as time went on? The monopoly began to crack. In the Middle Kingdom, the same kind of spells start to appear on wooden coffins. These are the coffin texts, wrapped around the dead like a second skin of language. Now high officials, regional governors, and powerful priests carry fragments of the royal curriculum into their own tombs. The mystery schools are widening, but only slightly. The gates are still guarded. By the new kingdom, the great experiment goes further. Painted papyri, the texts we call the Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, are commissioned by wealthy non-royals. Yet even here, the map is not mass-produced. Each scroll is customized, certain spells chosen, certain gates emphasized, the name of the owner carefully inserted so the guardians will hear it and obey. One scribe in Thebes might specialize in journeys through fire lakes, another in the weighing of the heart. What kind of knowledge was being tailored so precisely for each soul? Now contrast this with the ordinary farmer or potter along the Nile. Most people never saw a full set of these texts. Their protection came from simpler rituals, a few amulets, a short offering formula, the community's prayers, and a deep trust that living in harmony with Ma'at would be enough. For them, the afterlife was real, but the technical, text-heavy map of the Duat remained a distant royal language, whispered in temple schools and sealed in stone. Imagine, then, that you are not a pharaoh, but an initiate priest admitted into one of those hidden schools. You stand in a dark hall beneath a temple, walls sweating with cool stone, as an elder recites long chains of divine names. You repeat them until your voice shakes. Gate after gate, guardian after guardian, a crocodile-headed being, a serpent coiled around a lake of knives. You must memorize the correct greeting for each one. One forgotten word, one lost name, and in their imagination, the soul does not simply get turned around. It can be cut apart, swallowed, annihilated, a second death. Most importantly, all of this training aimed at a single, exalted goal, not to drift through the Duat as a confused shade, blown about by forces you do not understand, but to pass through as a conscious traveller, to emerge at dawn as an Ak, an effective, luminous one, aligned with Ma'at, radiant, purposeful, and capable of acting among gods and humans alike. In the next part of our journey, we'll find out together what trials such a traveller had to face when the first gate finally opened. Voices from the stone, the ancient books that mapped the night. The first gate does not open into empty darkness. It opens onto words carved in stone. Did you know that the earliest great maps of this journey were not scrolls at all, but walls? Around 2400 to 2300 BCE, inside the pyramids of kings like Unas at Saqqara, priests covered the inner chambers with hundreds of vertical columns of tiny blue-green signs. These are the pyramid texts, the oldest large-scale funerary corpus on Earth, a secret script literally wrapped around the dead pharaoh. On those walls, the king is commanded to rise as a star, to climb the sky on a ladder of light, to avoid decapitation by lurking demons, and to escape the jaws of serpents. Each spell is a key, protection against knives, a password at a gate, a formula to join Ra in his solar boat. Most of us grew up believing pyramids were just monumental tombs. But old legends tell a different story. These look less like epitaphs and more like a curriculum for a dangerous ascent. As centuries passed, something radical happened. The knowledge leaked outward. In the Middle Kingdom, the same spells began to appear, not only for kings, but on the wooden coffins of nobles and officials. These are the coffin texts. Suddenly, we see new maps of the Duat, winding waterways, hidden caverns, regions of fire and darkness. The afterlife is no longer only a royal sky road. It becomes a vast underground landscape that many souls might attempt to cross. The very coffins become portable schools, carrying their owners into the mystery already surrounded by written instructions. Then, in the New Kingdom, the map changes form again. Instead of walls or coffins, families place long papyrus scrolls beside the mummy. We call it the Book of the Dead, but the Egyptians named it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Each copy is different. Spells are chosen like tools, one to breathe, one to avoid having the heart stolen, one to pass a particular gate. Vivid vignettes show the dead standing before Osiris or sailing past guardians with crocodile heads. This is personalized spiritual technology, customized for a single soul's journey. At the same time, deep in the royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings, another genre appears. Along the corridors and burial chambers, painters lay out the Duat and the Book of Gates, hour-by-hour diagrams of the sun's nightly voyage. Here the Duat is divided into 12 hours, each with its own boats, deities, and terrifying guardians. The walls become initiation diagrams, almost like graphic novels of the underworld, guiding the pharaoh through each gate so that dawn and rebirth are guaranteed. But what really happened with these texts while their owners were still alive? Were they only for the dead, or were they also scripts for living rituals? According to the stories, priests recited these spells in dark temple rooms, in inner chambers few ever saw. Imagine standing there, surrounded by painted underworld scenes, chanting the names of Duat guardians, rehearsing the moment your heart would be weighed against Ma'at's feather. For thousands of years, these books may have functioned as manuals for controlled inner journeys, training initiates to walk the Duat in consciousness before the body ever failed. Most importantly, this turns the afterlife from a passive fate into an active discipline. What kind of knowledge were they encoding into stone, wood, and papyrus? Knowledge so detailed it could guide a soul through 12 nights of terror and out again into the eastern light. In the next part, we'll step inside those gates ourselves and follow that path, hour by hour, to see what trials awaited the traveler who dared to use these maps, blueprints beneath the sand, modern discoveries, and the hidden labyrinth. To follow that path, we don't just read the texts, we have to go back into the stone itself, because beneath the smooth faces of the pyramids and temples, modern machines are finding something the ancients always hinted at: hidden spaces, waiting in the dark. Did you know that in 2015, a project called Scan Pyramids began firing cosmic ray muons through the Great Pyramid of Giza? Most of us grew up seeing it as a solid mountain of stone. But in 2017, researchers announced a mystery, a massive void at least 30 meters long, hanging above the Grand Gallery like a silent, invisible chamber. No passages lead to it that we can see. No inscriptions tell us its purpose. Why build a room no living person could enter, unless it was meant for those training to leave the body behind? Other monuments are giving up their secrets too. At Darsha and Maidam, thermal scans and microgravity readings hint at unexplained corridors and cavities. According to the stories, these were houses of eternity. Yet the more we scan, the more they look like three-dimensional blueprints of the Duat itself, full of shafts, ramps, and sudden drops into the unknown. Now imagine walking beneath the desert at Saqqara. Long stairways plunge down into the earth. From a single entrance, tunnels branch and twist for hundreds of meters, connecting chambers, false doors, and deep vertical shafts. Catacombs for sacred animals stretch on like stone rivers. This does not feel like a simple cemetery. It feels like a labyrinth, a place where priests and initiates could rehearse getting lost and then finding the way out. At Abydos, the Assyrian sinks below the temple of Seti I like an artificial underworld. Massive granite blocks, an island of stone ringed by water, corridors leading into darkness. Old legends tell a different story about these places. They whisper that here, beneath the sand, the journey of Osiris was not just recited, but walked. Inside the royal tombs, the curriculum becomes even clearer. The tomb of Seti I in the Valley of the Kings is a multi-level descent painted from floor to ceiling, with scenes from the Duat, 12 hours of the night, serpents coiling around solar boats, gates guarded by knife-wielding beings. Nefertari's tomb glows with stars, goddesses, and protective spells. Every wall a portal. These are not decorations. They are immersive, 3D textbooks of the afterlife. But what really happened in these painted corridors? Picture a small group moving by torchlight, the flames making cobras and guardians seem alive. A priest stops at a painted gate, chants the required names, and waits in silence. The echoes answer like distant voices. Most importantly, the body responds, heart racing, senses sharpened, as if the Duat were already opening. Today, new technologies are allowing us back into this hidden school. High-resolution scans, spectral imaging, and VR reconstructions let us re-walk Seti's tomb, glide through the Great Pyramid's passages, and even peer into that unexplained void. For thousands of years, these spaces trained the dead. Now they may be training our imagination. But what happens when we follow the map all the way through, past every gate, every guardian, into the final hall where a single scale waits in the dark? Why bury a curriculum? The deeper question of secrecy. So we've reached that final hall in imagination, watching a lonely scale waiting in the dark. But now we have to stop and ask a strange question. If this whole journey through the Duat was meant to comfort the dead, why bury the curriculum? The texts are written in dense technical language. The diagrams twist like blueprints for another dimension. They were carved deep inside mountains of stone, sealed in hidden chambers that no living crowd would ever see. Did you know some passages in royal tombs are so narrow that only a single body can pass at a time, as if the architecture itself was imitating the soul's passage through a gate? We can explain part of the secrecy in simple, practical terms. Pharaohs and priests needed to protect royal power. If enemies stole the rituals, they might claim the same divine status. Tomb robbery was a constant threat, so treasures and scrolls were hidden behind false doors and blocked corridors. According to the stories, curses were added as a final warning. But when we listen closely to the language of the Duat manuals, something doesn't fit. These are not just comfort prayers. They read like training scripts, precise phrases, timed responses, step-by-step instructions for what to say, what to recognize, which gatekeeper to name, in which hour of the night. Old legends tell a different story. That initiates rehearse these lines in temple schools, long before death, as if cramming for the most important examination in existence. So we have to ask again, and more sharply, what did they think the soul would actually do in the duat that required this level of rehearsal? What kind of knowledge could be dangerous to the unprepared? Most importantly, why did they fear that mishandling it could destroy not just a body, but a destiny? Here is the pattern interrupt. The duat was not only a geography, it was a moral and cosmic field. Every cavern, every river of fire, every serpent and guardian was also a test of alignment with Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and order. To know the names of the gates without living in harmony with Ma'at was like holding a map made of fire. Use it wrongly, and it burned the one who carried it. For thousands of years, Egyptian texts warned of a horror worse than physical death, failing the judgment, having the heart devoured by Ammit, suffering a second, final death while others became radiant Aksh spirits. In that light, secrecy becomes something more than politics. It becomes spiritual quarantine. To really understand why the manuals were hidden, we have to understand what they were calibrating. Not a single simple soul, but a whole constellation of parts. A car that needed offerings, a bar that could fly, a name, a shadow, a heart that remembered every act. In the next section, we'll find out together how the Egyptians believed a person was built and what the Duat truly was for that many-layered being. 6 souls, 1 person, Ka, Ba, Ak, and the architecture of the self. To the Egyptians, a human being was not one soul in one body. It was a whole hidden architecture of selves, layered like chambers inside a pyramid. Did you know that for them, a person was a constellation of forces, Ka, Ba, Ak, Ren, Ib, and shaped, each with its own needs, dangers, and destiny? Most of us grew up hearing that the soul left the body and went to heaven or hell. But old legends tell a different story along the Nile. The Ka was the first key. This was the life force, the invisible double that stayed close to the tomb. It needed food, drink, and incense as carefully as the body once did. That is why offerings were piled on altars, and why false doors were carved into walls. Secret gateways where the Ka could taste the energy of bread, beer, and roasted meat. The Ba was different. The Ba could move. Priests painted it as a human-headed bird, wings spread, flying out from the sarcophagus at dawn. The Ba could leave the burial chamber, visit loved ones, travel through temple courts, and, most importantly, pass through the gates of the Duat to follow the sun god on his nightly journey. Without a functioning Ba, the dead were trapped, conscious but confined. If Ka is fuel and Ba is movement, Ak is the destination. The Ak was the perfected, luminous being the person could become after surviving the underworld trials. According to the stories, an Akh could join the stars, sit among the gods, and act in the world as an effective spirit, answering prayers and influencing events. But that transformation was not guaranteed. It had to be engineered through rituals, right living, and precise knowledge. Then there was the Ren, the name. Egyptians carved their names on sarcophagi, statues, walls, and even tiny amulets because the Ren anchored identity. To be remembered and spoken was to continue. To have the Ren erased was a second death. That is why some pharaohs had their cartouches chiseled out. It was an attack on the soul itself. The Ib, the heart, was the inner record keeper. It held memory, conscience, and thought. During mummification, every organ could be removed, except the heart. It stayed in the chest, waiting for the scales of Ma'at. Lose the heart in judgment, and the entire being was devoured by Amit. Even the shoot, the shadow, mattered. It was a subtle double, a dark twin that clung to the person in life and lingered in death. Statues, silhouettes on walls, and the cool shade of the tomb all served as resting places for this protective presence. Now the tomb begins to look less like a grave and more like a calibrated machine. The preserved body gave the car a home. Painted ceilings showed the sky so the bar knew the way. Names repeated on every surface defended the Ren. The intact heart prepared for its weighing. Statues and carved figures offered anchors for both shadow and spirit. Every corridor, every sealed chamber was tuned to keep this sixfold being coherent across worlds. And the Duat threatened each part differently. A forgotten name, a heart that betrayed its owner, a bar lost in dark caverns, a car starving without offerings, a soul that never quite ignited into Ach. The great funerary texts were not just poems about death, they were a survival kit for all six aspects at once. Spells to feed the car, formulas to free the bar, words to protect the name, steady the heart, and light the path toward Akhud. But this raises a deeper question. If a person was built from so many parts, what exactly was the Duat doing to them? Was it only a dangerous landscape, or a kind of cosmic school that tested, purified, and recombined the self? In the next section, we'll find out together how the underworld itself was mapped, hour by hour, gate by gate, and why initiates tried to walk that map long before their final breath. Mapping the Duat, 12 hours of night, rivers of fire, and serpent guardians. To answer that, we have to step inside the map itself. The Duat was not just a gloomy underworld somewhere below our feet. It was a hidden dimension threaded beneath and behind the visible world, a secret corridor of reality through which the sun god Ra sailed every single night in his golden bark. Imagine the sky darkening over Egypt. To us, the sun sets. To them, Ra was entering the first gate of the Duat, beginning a 12-hour journey through night. Did you know that priests actually described this journey hour by hour, chamber by chamber, in texts like the Amduat carved on tomb walls for thousands of years? Each hour was a distinct region with its own name, its own purpose, and its own terrifying guardians. This was not one vague afterlife. It was a clock made of otherworldly landscapes. 1 hour might open into a desert of shadow, another into a lake of burning water, another into narrow caverns where the walls themselves were alive with watching eyes. Old legends tell a different story than a simple heaven or hell. They speak of star-filled ceilings arching overhead, of subterranean rivers glowing like molten copper, and of islands floating in darkness, lit only by the fire that dripped from serpents' mouths. Everywhere there were gates, stone portals, iron doors, mysterious pylons rising out of black water. At each gate stood guardians, beings with lion faces and scorpion tails, women with cobra crowns, men whose bodies were human but whose heads were knives or flames. Rows of silent figures waited in the half-light, some human, some hybrid, each one listening for the correct name, the correct spell, the correct ritual phrase. Most importantly, this realm was ruled by order. Nothing in the Duat was random. Every gate had a name. Every guardian had a title. Every lake, cavern, and river of fire had a specific function in dismantling and reassembling the soul. According to the stories, Ra himself had to speak to these beings correctly as his boat glided past, or the journey would fail and dawn would never come. The dead were not just wandering alone here. They were imagined as joining Ra's bark or following its wake, passing through the same 12 hours, facing the same enemies. Chief among them was the chaos serpent Apophis, a colossal snake that tried to strangle the sun's boat and swallow creation each night. Priests recited spells in temple chambers to stab, bind, and burn this serpent in advance. But what really happened to an individual soul inside this cosmic schedule of darkness? How did each hour take apart one layer of identity and rebuild it into something radiant? In the next section, we'll find out together what those 12 hours demanded from the dead, and how initiates in Egypt's mystery schools rehearsed every gate long before their own final sunset. Judgment at the scales, Ma'at, the heart, and the terror of second death. Those 12 hours led to one place, one chamber, one moment where everything a person had ever done was placed on a scale. Imagine emerging from the tunnels of the Duat into a vast hall lined with silent figures. This is the Hall of Ma'at, the climax of the entire journey. In the center stands a great balance. On one side, a single feather. On the other, your heart still carrying every memory, every intention, every secret thought from your life. According to the stories, this is spell 125 of the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide, adjusts the scales with careful hands. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, stands ready with his palette, recording the result. Around them, 42 divine assessors watch, each representing a district of Egypt and a specific aspect of Ma'at. But what really happened here, in Egyptian belief? Ma'at was more than a goddess. Ma'at was truth, justice, and cosmic order itself. To live in Ma'at meant living in harmony with the pattern that held the universe together. The heart, the Ib, was left inside the mummified body because it was the living record of that alignment. Did you know the Egyptians believed the heart could literally testify for or against its owner? If that heart was heavier than the feather of Ma'at, the scene turned terrifying. Waiting beside the scales crouched Amit, the eater of the dead, with crocodile head, lion's forebody, and hippo's back. No prison, no torture, just instant erasure. A failed heart was thrown to Amit, and the soul suffered what the Egyptians feared most, a second death. This second death was not endless pain. It was obliteration. No no effective, luminous spirit, no continuity of consciousness. The person was cut out of the ordered cosmos, unable to join the ancestors, unable to move through the gates of the sky. For thousands of years, this was the nightmare that Egyptian rituals tried to prevent. To stand a chance, the deceased did more than rely on secret names and passwords. They recited the negative confessions before the 42 assessors. I have not stolen. I have not murdered. I have not polluted the water. I have not lied. Each statement was a claim of moral alignment with Ma'at, showing that right action mattered just as much as technical knowledge of spells. If the scale balanced, everything changed. The heart was returned. The person became an Ak, a radiant, effective being. They could join the company of the gods, walk in the field of reeds, and most importantly, influence the living, sending dreams, protection, and guidance from the other side. But what kind of training could prepare someone to face that scale while still alive? And how did Egypt's hidden schools use this terrifying judgment as a blueprint for inner transformation? In the next section, we'll find out together. Rehearsing the night, how the living practice dying. The answer is unsettling. The highest initiates of Egypt did not wait for death to test their souls. They rehearsed it. Night after night, in hidden chambers and temple courts, they practiced dying. Did you know that for thousands of years, the Duat was treated almost like a curriculum? Pharaohs, priests, and chosen initiates walked through rituals that broke their identities apart and put them back together. To the outside world, these looked like royal festivals or ordinary temple ceremonies. But old legends tell a different story. Pharaohs were not just kings, they were living Horus, training to become Osiris. During the Sed festival, often celebrated in a ruler's 30th year, the pharaoh acted out weakness, death, and renewal. He ran ritual courses, sat on dual thrones, and received crowns again, as if reborn. Some Egyptologists suggest that in deeper, more secret phases, he may have descended into dark inner rooms, lain as if lifeless, and risen at dawn as a renewed being. Public celebration on the surface, symbolic descent and ascent below. High priests mirrored this journey in quieter ways. They memorized long passages from the pyramid texts, coffin texts, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and the Amduat, which maps the 12 hours of the night. Imagine spending years learning the names of gates, serpents, lakes of fire, and star gods until the Duat felt more familiar than the desert outside. Forgetting a single name could mean annihilation in the afterlife. In training, it meant starting again. The outer courts are silent, but deep inside, torches flicker against carved walls. Serpents coil in relief along the stone. Solar boats glide across the plaster, and rows of painted guardians glare with inlaid eyes. A single priest walks a narrow corridor as if it were the river of the underworld itself. At a painted gate, he stops. Before him, a figure is only pigment and line, yet he bows as though a real guardian blocks the way. He recites a sequence of names, of the gate, of the door bolts, of the being behind it. His voice resonates in the stone, low and measured. In the texts, speaking the correct name forces the gate to open. Here, there is no visible movement, only a subtle shift inside the practitioner. Fear rises, is faced, and dissolves. This is the pattern interrupt. The Duat was not only a place the dead travelled, it was an inner landscape the living could explore. The so-called funerary texts functioned like travel manuals and scripts for guided inner journeys. According to the stories, lying in dark chambers, chanting specific lines, initiates learned to watch their own thoughts as if they were spirits approaching. They practiced staying lucid in dreams, steady in terror, responsive in the unknown. Most importantly, this rehearsal trained the mind to remain awake when the body failed. If consciousness could stay clear through symbolic death, perhaps it could navigate the real gates beyond the tomb. And in the next section, we'll find out together how these rehearsals shaped the architecture of Egypt's most mysterious temples. Hour by hour, inside the gates and trials of the Duat, those rehearsals in the dark were not abstract philosophy. They were practice for a very specific rhythm. Gate, challenge, response, reward. Did you know the Egyptians believed the afterlife unfolded almost like a ritual script, hour by hour, across 12 hidden regions of night? In the Duat, nothing simply lets us pass. At each gate or cavern, a guardian waits. Sometimes it is a single towering figure with a knife. Sometimes a trio of crocodile-headed beings. Sometimes an entire crew of demons with hooked blades. The pattern is always the same. The soul must recognize who stands before it, speak a secret name, perform a precise ritual act, and only then receive safe passage or help for the next stage of the journey. The Duat and the Book of Gates read like training manuals for this encounter response reward cycle. 1 hour, a colossal serpent coils across the path. According to the stories, it cannot be killed by weapons. It can only be bound by words. The initiate must recite a spell that pins each coil, naming its joints, its teeth, its blazing eyes. Get the sequence right, and the serpent lies still, becoming a bridge. Miss a line, and it turns, striking the soul with poison that can trap it in that region forever. Another region holds a lake of fire. To the unprepared, it burns and devours. But old legends tell a different story for those carrying the right knowledge. When the soul calls the lake by its secret title, honors the deities who tend it, and claims its own purity, the flames reverse their nature. The fire becomes protective, a moat that burns enemies while leaving the traveler untouched, a living symbol of purified energy rather than destruction. In yet another hour, a group of decapitators waits beside a doorway. Their blades are raised. Their only task is to cut down intruders. The texts describe them by name and function. The initiate must greet each one, reciting who they are, why they stand there, and why the traveler is exempt. Precision matters. Mispronounce a name, confuse one guardian for another, and the head they take is the traveler's own. For thousands of years, priests drilled these lines as if they were technical codes. Each of the 12 hours has its own atmosphere. Early hours dismantle the old self, stripping away titles and possessions. Middle hours confront the deepest chaos, including the great serpent Apophis, who attacks the solar bark. Later hours focus on reassembly, preparing the soul to rise with Ra and come forth by day at dawn. Most importantly, this pattern is rarely shown in full. Many tomb walls display only selected hours, a few gates, a handful of guardians. It is as if the visible art was just the outer syllabus, while the rest remained hidden in memory and inner experience. What kind of knowledge was reserved for the mind alone, never carved in stone? In the next section, we'll find out together how temple architecture itself became a map of these invisible gates. Are these monsters you? The initiatory reading of the Duat. A map of these invisible gates might not only describe a journey after death, it might describe a journey inside. But what really happened when an initiate stepped into those hidden chambers and closed the stone door behind them? Did you know that some Egyptologists and many modern esoteric readers look at the Duat and ask a dangerous question? Were those crocodile-headed beings, serpent knives, and lakes of fire literal inhabitants of an underworld? Or were they symbolic guardians of fear, guilt, and unintegrated parts of the self? When a text warns that a demon will eat the heart of the unworthy, is that a monster outside you, or a force inside that devours your courage? This is the initiatory reading of the Duat. According to the stories, the journey through the 12 hours of night mirrors an inner descent through layers of the psyche. Each gate, each cavern, each terrifying guardian becomes a trial of consciousness. The soul confronts its own shadow, dissolves rigid identities, and, if successful, reassembles as an Ak, a luminous, effective being. In this view, the Duat is not just beneath the earth, it is beneath awareness. Old legends tell a different story than a simple horror landscape. In temple rituals, priests rehearsed the weighing of the heart not only to pass a cosmic courtroom, but to measure how aligned they were with Ma'at right now. The feather of truth is not only a divine object, it is a standard for the inner life. A heavy heart is weighed down by lies, violence, and unacknowledged grief. A light heart belongs to someone who has already faced their inner armit and survived. This idea is not unique to Egypt. In the Greek world, the Eleusinian mysteries led initiates through dramatized scenes of death and rebirth, in dark halls, emerging with a secret vision that removed the fear of the grave. Orphic gold tablets placed on the dead describe a post-mortem journey with passwords, forbidden springs, and guardians at the gates, almost a Greek echo of the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Later Hermetic texts, written in an Egyptian-Greek world, speak of rising through planetary spheres, shedding vices at each level. Different cultures, the same pattern, an outer map of the afterlife that doubles as an inner map of awakening. So what kind of knowledge were the Egyptian mystery schools really guarding? Many researchers now suggest that temples functioned as controlled Duat simulators. In dark sanctuaries, underground corridors, and resonance-heavy halls, initiates could undergo symbolic death, ego dissolution, and rebirth under the guidance of trained priests before facing the real thing at the final breath. Most importantly, the Egyptians did not draw a hard line between symbol and reality. A crocodile-headed guardian could be a real being in the Duat and a living image of rage, terror, or instinct in the heart. For thousands of years, they trained to face both at once. But if the temples were built as living diagrams of this inner underworld, how exactly did their stones, corridors, and chambers guide someone through that invisible journey. In the next section, we'll find out together where the architecture itself begins to speak, reading tombs with new eyes. Archaeology meets initiation. To see how the architecture begins to speak, we step into one of the most astonishing tombs ever carved, the tomb of Seti I in the Valley of the Kings. Imagine descending the long sloping corridor, torchlight flickering on polished limestone, and realizing that every inch of wall is not decoration, but a living diagram of the Duat. On the first passage, the scenes unfold like the opening chapters of a textbook. We meet rows of deities lined up in registers, each with a name, each holding a symbol. To a casual visitor, they look like a crowd of strange gods. Through an initiatory lens, they become examiners at the first gates, the beings who demand the right words, the right state of heart, before the journey can continue. Did you know that many of these figures are labeled with captions that match the Amduat and the Book of Gates, almost line for line? As we move deeper, the chambers shift with the hours of the night. One room maps the first hours of the Duat, the solar bark gliding through a mysterious river, protected by serpents that coil around it. Old legends tell a different story than simple fear of snakes. Those serpents can be read as channels of energy, guiding and constricting at the same time, obstacles and conduits the soul must learn to navigate. Boats are no longer just boats. They are vehicles of consciousness, carrying the pharaoh's bar through invisible currents. Look up. In Seti's tomb and in Nefertari's radiant burial chambers, the ceilings explode into deep blue fields filled with golden stars. For thousands of years, visitors saw only pretty patterns. But what really happened, if this is a star map? Modern researchers have shown that these constellations echo the night sky over Egypt, turning the ceiling into a cosmic chart for the soul, a reminder of the larger landscape beyond the stone. According to the stories, priests would have known exactly which text each wall belonged to. Egyptologists today do something similar. They map these scenes to specific compositions. The Amduat wrapping around one chamber, the Book of Gates marching along another, the Book of Caverns plunging into terrifying lower registers where bound enemies and inverted figures hint at second death. The tomb becomes a 3D textbook for the afterlife, a curriculum you walk through, not just read. Then, sudden shift, pattern interrupt. The camera jumps from the silent Valley of the Kings to a bright modern museum gallery. Glass, white walls, a single papyrus of the Book of the Dead laid out in a long case. Most visitors see a beautiful, fragile artwork. With this new lens, it transforms into a personal Duat itinerary. Gates listed in order, guardians drawn in sequence, spells placed like checkpoints on a map. Now imagine walking through any Egyptian collection as if it were a fragment of an ancient mystery school. Every vignette becomes a lesson, a heart weighed in one corner, a boat passing a serpent in another, a star goddess arching over the sky in a third. What kind of knowledge were these images trying to protect? Most importantly, what happens if we begin to study them the way an initiate once did, as training for our own inner journey through darkness and back into light? In the next section, we'll find out together how these images might still be used as living practices, not just remnants of a distant past. What do we do with this map? Lessons from the Duat for the living. If these images are more than decoration, what do we actually do with them? If the Duat is a map, what kind of journey is it inviting us to take while we are still breathing? The core Egyptian insight is quietly radical. Death for them was not a single moment when the heart stopped. It was a long passage through hidden chambers, tests, and confrontations. A night of trials that could end in annihilation by Amit, or in becoming an Ak, a luminous, effective spirit. According to the stories, that outcome depended on preparation, knowledge, and inner alignment with Ma'at. Did you know the heart was left inside the body on purpose? Priests removed the brain, but protected the heart because it carried memory, conscience, and truth. In the hall of Ma'at, that heart would be weighed against a feather. Imagine that for a second. Not a god judging from outside, but your own life, your own pattern of choices, rising or falling on the scale. If that is the map, how do we rehearse the Duat now? We may not lie in stone sarcophagi under pyramids, but we still enter our own dark corridors. We can practice small weighings long before any final judgment. Honest reflection at the end of a day, speaking the truth when it is easier to hide, aligning actions with a personal version of Ma'at, our deepest sense of balance, justice, and integrity. Old legends tell a different story about the purpose of these rituals. They hint that pharaohs and priests were not only preparing for physical death, but training to meet fear and shadow on command, spending nights in black chambers, facing inner serpents, before outer crisis forced it. That is a lesson we can borrow. Instead of waiting for a breakup, a diagnosis, or a collapse to confront our underworld, we can meet it deliberately through meditation, therapy, shadow work, or simple, courageous honesty. Because in one sense, we do not die once. We die many times. An identity ends. A career dissolves. A relationship passes through its own gates and does not return. Each of these is a Duat hour, a stretch of darkness where the old sun has vanished and the new one is not yet born. The Egyptian map whispers, "Do not cling to the corpse of what you were. Learn the names of your fears. Offer what must be left behind. Walk on." But what really happened when a culture spends thousands of years building its greatest monuments around this passage? What does it say that more care went into a single night of transition than into entire lifetimes of work? It suggests they took consciousness and responsibility for consciousness with terrifying seriousness. To them, awareness was not an accident of the brain. It was a sacred traveler that had to be trained. Most importantly, this raises a personal question. If your heart were on the scale tonight, what would it weigh? Where have you lived in alignment with your own Ma'at? And where does the record feel heavy? What hidden gates are already in front of you? A decision postponed, a truth avoided, a calling ignored, quietly waiting for the right password of action to open. In the next part, we'll find out together how some of the very practices used in temple schools, breath, sound, imagination, can become modern rituals for walking those gates with our eyes open. Emerging by day, recap, reflection, and the next gate. So now, imagine this. The questions have been asked, the gates have opened, and the long night of the Duat is almost over. In the deepest silence, a faint glow appears on the horizon of the underworld. Ra's boat is rising, And beside that solar bark, a traveller who began in a stone chamber now rises too, emerging with the sun, coming forth by day as an Ak, luminous, conscious, effective. Did you know the Egyptians did not picture death as a single, simple moment? For thousands of years, they imagined a whole inner ecosystem of soul parts waking up together. The Ka needing food and offerings. The Ba, bird-bodied, flying through hidden chambers. The Ren, the name, spoken to keep memory alive. The shadow, the heart, and finally the Ak, the completed being, radiant enough to stand among the stars. To reach that point, the traveller had to cross a very specific map. 12 hours of night, caverns, rivers of fire, gates guarded by beings who looked part human, part animal, part nightmare. We followed that path, past serpent guardians, through secret halls, all the way to the scales where the heart was weighed against Ma'at's feather. Too heavy, and Amit erased the soul, light and balanced, and the traveller stepped into a new kind of life. But what really happened on that journey depended on preparation. Old legends tell a different story than a simple heaven or hell. According to the stories, pharaohs and priests spent years rehearsing these trials in hidden schools, reciting the Book of Coming Forth by day, whispering passwords in dark stone rooms, using breath, stillness, and sound to practice leaving the body like a barbird and returning again. Most importantly, these were not just travel manuals for a distant afterlife, they were mirrors. The Duat became an inner landscape. Every gate was a decision. Every monster was a fear. Every cavern was a forgotten memory. When a temple reader spoke the Amduat, or the coffin texts over a mummy, they were also speaking to the living, inviting them into their own secret underworld. And yet, this is only 1 hour of a much longer night. There were many more books of the underworld, regional maps of the Duat, temple rites that blended astronomy, medicine, and ritual drama. What kind of knowledge was carried in those lost scrolls? What initiations unfolded in the underground labyrinths beneath Saqqara or within still unopened chambers of the pyramids? We'll find out together, one gate at a time. For now, a gentle invitation. The next time we stand before a painted tomb wall, a museum sarcophagus, or even our own quiet thoughts about death, what if we look again? What if every symbol is a training diagram, every spell a rehearsal for consciousness? Because if the Egyptians were right, we too are moving toward a gate, not of stone, but of history. As a civilization, what threshold are we approaching now? Will we stumble through it as sleepwalkers, or step across as trained travelers of our own Duat, ready to meet whatever waits in the next chamber of time?